And people here in the room, we're going to be doing our chant on page 30, I believe, the suffusion with the divine abidings. Some of you already know that chant. Sometimes we call it the 4 quarters chant. And those of you online, you can find the chant on the document that I put in the chat here. And for newcomers online, you've noticed, of course, that I've spotlighted myself because we do record the Sunday morning programs live on YouTube live stream. So just so everyone knows, you can find all of the Sunday morning talks on our YouTube channel, and most of our other programs also get recorded and are up on our YouTube channel. And you can also find the audio on the wonderful website dharmaseed.org. So you don't need to worry about missing a Sunday. If you want to follow along with the content, you can always catch it later in that way. But those of you online, if you want to see the gallery view, you can select gallery view on your own computer. So let's go ahead and do the chant, suffusion with the divine abidings, or 4 quarters chant. Now let us make the 4 boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with gladness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And we'll settle in to our posture for the meditation. Maggie, could you open that door all the way? Just increase the circulation. Thanks. And those of us who have been meditating for a while, we know that we'll never find the perfect sitting posture. So we just do the best we can. And it can be a nice ritual at the beginning of a sitting time to take a couple of longer, easy breaths in and out, where we take our time to fill the lungs, taking our time to empty the lungs, but without any forcing. And you can feel this as a simple gift to the body, this easy, deep breathing. Really taking your time and using it as a way to connect, to be more intimate with the physicality of this sitting body. Coming home, not afraid to be embodied, to be feeling what we're feeling. So maybe one more of these longer, easy, deep breaths in and out. And eventually we'll let our breathing continue on its own. And we're not trying to make the breath any particular way. Instead, let's trust the body to do the breathing, whatever that might be like, even if it feels a little controlled or tight or whatever. Just know that the body knows how to breathe. And it's so nice not to have to be in charge, not to have to oversee the breathing process. And we begin our sit today, we access our confidence in our refuge, that there's something here and now that's worthy of being present for. Our life is here and now. Everything that has any significance is here and now. So we're establishing mindfulness, present moment awareness, here and now, which simply means that the mind values this recognition that this is being felt, being known. The heart values non-distraction. We're not looking for any particular experience yet. we're just remembering how much we value being present, being right in the middle, and of course right here in the middle, what is recognized? Well, what's recognized is that this experience of the body and mind is being known and being felt, that it's like this. And we're not claiming that the particular sensations are special, but just that there's something fundamentally wholesome and right about being present, and there's something fundamentally off about being distracted or disconnected, lost in thought. So we're abandoning any doubt about the significance or the value of being present. Or we're remembering that being disconnected never makes sense. And even though the experience that's being felt, the body, sitting, whatever, even though that might be unpleasant in different ways, still there's something right about being present, being connected, being open. And to whatever degree that we value this mindful presence, then we're willing to persist, keeping the present moment in mind, and beginning again when we need to begin again, and persisting, which is really mostly about not forgetting that it's like this now, or this is being known. And because the habits of distractedness are so strong, it can feel initially a little awkward, or even strangely inappropriate to be present. And as most of us know, the Buddha gives us really his most complete set of instructions. Begins with using the natural process of breathing in and breathing out as an important support for developing this beautiful presence. In the initial instructions, the Buddha is asking us to simply notice the breath coming in, the breath going out, and to be comprehending or attending to the breathing process closely enough that there can be a sense of whether it's a longer breath or whether it's a shorter breath, whether it's a grosser breath or a more refined breath in or out. So it's not about manipulating the breathing process in any way, but just tracking, or you could even say comprehending, the quality of this particular in-breath or out-breath. And just sensing its length, its shortness, its roughness, its refinement. So we're cultivating an exclusive attention to the natural process of breathing in and out. And to do that, we have to let go of whatever else the mind might be knowing. Let that fall into the background. And let's pick up the simple training of simply knowing the breath coming in just as it is, and then simply tracking, feeling the breath going out just as it is. We're allowing the breathing process to be the way it is. And so it's really this effort to be interested in the natural process of breathing in from the beginning to the end, and then breathing out from the beginning of the out-breath to the end. And we're cultivating this unwavering, unbroken attentiveness to the natural process of breathing in and out. Whatever aspect of the physicality that's easy for you to track, like the touching at the nostrils, or the rising and falling of the abdominal wall, expansion, contraction of the chest. So wherever it's easy to feel that movement of breathing in and out. And without getting tight, see if you can let this be the most important thing. Don't give up. Begin again and again and again and again. And for some of us, there's a tendency to tighten up both the body and the mind. So in a gentle way, invite yourself to relax and soften. This practice doesn't require any kind of mental or physical tension. And the key here is the continuity of present moment awareness, and we're using the natural process of breathing in and out as a training ground for cultivating this continuity and using, in this case, an exclusive meditation object. So that just means everything else is in the background. And we're choosing to let the breath, the sensations of breathing in and out, choosing to let that be in the foreground of attention. And although subtle, there actually is a real pleasure in the simplicity, in the non-distractedness, the continuity. So sense, if you can, that pleasure of just being with the breathing in and then being with the breathing out. But include that pleasurable sense of simplicity, the beginnings of the unification of the heart and mind in this simple knowing of breathing in and breathing out. And generally speaking, with training, with more continuity, this continuity of remembering, being interested in this meditation object, the physicality of breathing in and breathing out, and the pleasure of that seclusion, that non-distractedness. There's that sense of wholeness or fullness related to the quality of presence. And it usually feels good. And the breath generally becomes more refined, more subtle. And you can notice that natural movement toward a more subtle, refined breath. We're not trying to make the breath subtle or refined. We're just noticing whether it's long or whether it's short, whether it's gross or whether it's subtle. And we're balancing the tranquility that might be arising with a more beautiful, heightened interest. And now the next instruction the Buddha gives us is one trains oneself breathing in, knowing the totality of the body. One trains oneself while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So we're just tuning into this natural inclusivity of present moment awareness. For the past minutes, we've been having a more exclusive attention to the breathing process. Of course, we're still aware of breathing in and breathing out. But while we know that the breath is coming in, we're training the mind to be aware of the whole body just as it is. And as we're aware that the breath is going out, we're training the mind to be interested in the whole body just as it is. So pick up this training. Now we're interested in the totality of the body as we're breathing in and as we're breathing out. So it's more of an openness, feeling the body together. We're not trying to undo any of the physical knots in the body or fix the body in any way. We're just, in a sense, we're saying yes to the whole body as we breathe in, yes to feeling the whole body as we breathe out. And you might notice a subtle but really beautiful healing the body and the awareness of the body getting along, this non-judging, non-controlling, but still intimate presence with the body. As we breathe in, as we're breathing out, kind of embracing, forgiving, allowing attitude with the body. we can learn to let everything else happen in the background. Sounds, other sensations, thoughts. And we stay with this healing presence of the whole body while we're breathing in, while the breath is going out, and noticing the calming effect on the body. And wherever you feel any sense of calm energetically in the body, just appreciating that calm as you breathe in, appreciating the calm in the body as you breathe out. And there can be this sense of that calm spreading, like just the awareness of the calm, the valuing of the calm is a supporting cause for its spreading and deepening throughout the body. And so this fourth instruction, the Buddha says, one trains oneself while breathing in, calming the body. And one trains oneself while breathing out, calming the body. And the way we do that, it is simply keeping the calm in mind, the bodily calm in mind as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And this can be needs to be a real practice, because the tendency is to want to pay attention to the pain in the body. But instead, we're paying attention to where it feels good, tranquil and calm in the body, as you're breathing in and as you're breathing out. Just do the best you can. So much of the path of awakening is learning how to keep what is healing and good and pleasant in this inner sense, how to keep that in mind. So for just another minute, as best you can, whatever harmonizing there's been between the body and mind, good feeling in the body, calm, can we keep it in mind for 1/2 breath in, and then keeping it in mind for the 1/2 breath out. And take a little time, adjust your body, whatever you need to do to be comfortable. Good to be with everyone. Maybe I'll show the people online, our community, now that we're starting to get folks back in the room here at the center. And then, like we often do, we have about 85 people online. Yeah, really nice to be with everyone this morning. Beautiful day here in Minneapolis. And I've mentioned this month, and for a couple more months, I'll be covering this path of practice that the Buddha taught. And there's some basic, skillful means, ways of working with our own heart, body, mind that we want to get good at. And however not good we are at those skills, the cool thing is we can get better, but we have to apply ourselves. And you know, we human beings, we're doing stuff all the time, cultivating habits, mostly unconsciously, all the time. So part of, maybe the main part of a spiritual path is that recognition that whether I'm aware of it or not, I'm cultivating habits. So let me be aware that I'm cultivating habits and be conscious, consciously choose, well, what habits are worthy of cultivation? So I mentioned, and this is really coming right out of the Buddha's teachings, it's really his most repeated and highly praised and specific set of instructions that he gave for meditation practice. The mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out. But remember, even though it sounds like he's just talking about being aware of the breath, that's really just for the first couple of the 16 instructions. And then after the first couple of instructions, we're really being aware of different aspects of the mind. But the breath is there kind of like a metronome. I know I'm in the present moment because I notice the breath is coming in or I'm noticing the breath is going out. But what I'm really interested in is the totality of the body, that was the third instruction, or feeling that healing calm in the body, which is the fourth instruction. And then onward to a sense of joy, that lightness and ease. I always know when it's the equinox because the sun comes in. So when we get close to, we're not there yet, of course, but for the next month or so, there will be sun shining at this time of day. And last week I mentioned all the way along the real guiding principle is this weaning our heart off of the real pleasures we get by thinking about what we want to think about and consuming what we consume, right? There's real juiciness in sense pleasure. If I start fantasizing about a retreat or fantasizing about ice cream, there's a little sense hit there, a little juiciness, a little excitement. And basically, most of the time we're content just, feeding off of whatever our mind can find to feed off of. Have you caught your mind like looking for something exciting to think about, to worry about, to plan about, to fantasize about? And then if we watch like with a kind of equanimity balance, we really get a sense, oh yeah, the mind is trying to extract some nutriment from that obsessive thinking. I'm trying to get something. And then I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's like chewing gum. Initially you put the stick of gum in your mouth, it's got a lot of flavor. But after a while, there's not much flavor, and you want to put a new stick of gum in. And that's a little bit like the mind's tendency to obsess, whether I'm thinking about the future or regurgitating the past, or obsessing, thinking about something in the moment. But that's a kind of the go-to habit of the mind. And then the first, really the basic principle in our spiritual practice is to wean ourselves off of those worldly pleasures or worldly drama, the juiciness of worldly drama. That's why we often sit in a relatively empty room, or, those of us who don't have a spare room at home, we sit in front of a wall or in front of a window or something relatively neutral, not where all of our interesting stuff is, but something like a plant, that doesn't elicit a lot of drama for us. And, we tell the people we live with, leave me alone for 30 minutes. And you train your dog or your cat to leave you alone for that period of time. And you sit in a relatively comfortable way that supports alertness and relaxation. Because even though from an outside perspective, like from one of our friends who don't meditate, it's like, that seems really boring. You're just sitting there for 45 minutes or 60 minutes or 10 minutes, and you're not really moving. And when you catch your mind doing those juicy things, thinking about something that was dramatic from the past or fantasizing about something in the future, you persistently bring it back to what? The breath? You mean you're just feeling the air touching the nostrils as it goes in, and feeling the air touching the nostrils as you go out, or feeling the rising and the falling? Why would you do that, right? That's because from an ordinary point of view, like from a friend who doesn't do the practice, or from ourselves before we started the practice, we would think about like tracking that experience of the rising and falling of the belly that corresponds with breathing in and breathing out. And we'd go, there is nothing juicy to feed on in that experience. So why would I attend to it? But here's the big significant difference, and why it really defines is the flavor of the whole path. We're going from our usual go-to move, which is to try to feed on drama and intensity of our sense experiences, the pleasure and pain, avoiding the pain, of course, getting the pleasure of our sights, of sound, of smell, of taste, of touch, and of thought. Thought about sense experience, right? Because that has a little of the same thing as the actual experience. When I think about the sweet taste of ice cream, I salivate, right? Because there's something about imagining sense experience with thought that has a little bit of the actual sense experience itself. And so that's our go-to. But now what we're trying to uncover and use as a kind of guidepost is it really feels good to not be caught in the endlessness of seeking something juicy with sense experience. It actually feels good to abandon that endless pursuit, to put it down. A little bit like deep sleep, we put it down, right? We're not in pursuit of anything in those deeper stages of sleep. Same with our meditative journey. It's not the whole journey, but it's an essential part because it gives our heart the taste of simplicity, and we realize, although subtle, it feels good. And the mind that isn't divided, it isn't fragmented, it isn't disturbed by our chewing on juicy stuff, feeding on intensity, seeking this, getting rid of that. Because now the mind is, in a sense, organizing itself around something simple. Just being with the physicality of breathing in. Just being with the physicality of breathing out. And because that's so ordinary and neutral for most of us, there are people maybe who've had breathing problems or asthma, then your breath may not be a suitable training ground for your collecting, gathering the mind in the present moment. But for most people, it's a suitable training ground. And if you don't want to use the breath, you can use the whole body, you can use hearing, you can even use different touch points in the body for those first couple instructions, where we're using that exclusive anchor. So it's, we need to borrow some faith that it has some value from the Buddha, who's saying, just track the breathing in. From the beginning of the in-breath to the end, let the sensations of breathing in or breathing out be in the forefront of attention. Don't worry about thoughts, other sensations, sounds, like the lawnmower or whatever that is. Just let that stuff be where it is. You don't have to be in conflict with the other phenomena that are there in the present moment. That's really important, because sometimes we think like, in order to be with the breath, I have to pay attention to that obnoxious sound of the weed whip or the lawnmower, as if it's going to change things. No. It's all about interest, cultivating interest in the meditation object. And we actually have the capacity to be interested in what's ordinary and neutral. We don't have to pay attention to the juicy, predominant phenomena in the moment. It's just the habit. Attention will naturally go to the most obnoxious, loudest, provocative, whatever, sound, sight, thought, smell, taste. It's just going to go there. That's just almost like an instinct. And then we pick up the training and say, yeah, sure, you're here, but how about this? Can you be with that physicality of the belly rising? Excuse me. And falling, or the touching for some of you, or expansion of the chest and the contraction of the chest. It doesn't really matter what aspect of the breathing process, because we're just looking for something that's dynamic. That's one of the nice things about the breathing process as opposed to touch points or even the whole body. The dynamic nature is a little bit more obvious with the breath, which makes it a little bit more interesting. So initially, the attentiveness, it's like it's a higher challenge because it's changing. The breath isn't some static entity. It's a natural process that's always changing. And so it draws out this capacity to be attentive. See, to be with the breath, it can't be the previous moment, because the breath now is not the same as the previous moment. So the attentiveness, the interest, has to renew itself and renew itself and renew itself. And that about the breath, but you have to do it with whatever object you're going to use as your training object, right? You have to renew the interest moment by moment by moment by moment, because that's the only thing that's going to cause everything else to go into the background. And that's what allows the heart to realize, this feels good, in a deep inner sense. Like I think I mentioned last week, it's a taste of seclusion. The mind is feeling secluded from what normally torments the mind. Everything I see, whether we know it or not, we have a little opinion about. And even if we see something that's ordinary, I look at John's shirt and I see an ordinary shirt. Sorry, John. But, it's like, but even that, like that subtle, mostly, almost always unconscious, like, oh, I don't have an opinion about that shirt. Even that is some agitating work for my mind. Like that dismissing of what's neutral, ordinary, because it's neutral and ordinary. It's stressful to be defining things as ordinary, just like it's stressful to be liking what we like and not liking what we don't like. It's stressful, surprisingly, with our ordinary mind, it's stressful for this mind, the sensitive mind, heart, to be impinged moment by innumerable sense contacts, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, thoughts, touches. And the sensitive mind, sensitive heart is in relationship to all of that. And it's a stressful burden that we don't even realize until we start to taste what it's like when the mind is attending to just one thing and it's having a vacation from attending to everything else. And we realize, oh, that feels good. The simplicity of not being obliged to attend to all that the mind would otherwise be attending to feels good. And so that's why that cultivation of interest, it's not a forceful, willful move. We're inspiring the mind, like this training for the first two instructions, we're inspiring the mind to be interested, to be attentive to something that's ordinary. And you can do this, I mentioned this last week, we can do this all day long because it's the same muscle. Whenever you're doing something ordinary and you choose to be 100% there, you're shutting a door, but you're really there 100% in that ordinary activity of shutting the door, or driving, or chopping vegetables, or brushing your teeth, or waiting in line for the clerk. Doesn't matter what it is, but you're using whatever is ordinary in that experience, and you're training your mind, your heart, to be fully present, attentive in that ongoing way, not one moment, but sustaining the interest. Then you're developing that muscle, and you'll know that you're doing the training if you feel the natural, inevitable result, which is now the mind is a little bit more simple, a little bit more gathered, less dissipated by knowing this and that and knowing its reaction to this and that. So it's doing less and less of that and more being present with an ordinary experience that isn't triggering reactivity because of its ordinariness, right? That's why I mentioned, like, if you have some trauma around breath, like you had a lot of asthma as a child, it's probably not a good meditation training object for you. Because we want the neutrality of something like breathing in and breathing out, or feeling the whole body, or hearing sounds when it isn't a weed whip, or something like that, like just the wind blowing through the trees, or crickets at night, or whatever it might be. Just the blower of your furnace. Because that white noise is profoundly neutral. And our habit is to ignore what's neutral. So we have to develop the habit of being interested and attentive. And initially it's a lot of work until we start to feel that subtle pleasure of seclusion. And then we're conjoining the attentiveness with the neutral training object with the pleasure, the very real but subtle pleasure of that simplicity. Then it starts to get easier and easier. And that's our work, especially with this first set of 4 instructions. We want to develop that spiritual muscle, that capacity to be interested in neutrality. And we have all day long to train, and then in our daily sit, when we put aside that time, now you won't necessarily do this for your whole sit, but the first part of every sit, even if you've been meditating like myself for 40 years, I do at least a little of this at the beginning of every sit, where I'm being exclusively attentive to something, because it's such a convenient way for the mind to drop what it would normally be obsessing or thinking or reacting to. Because I'm bringing to the forefront a meditation object, and I'm saying, honey, let's pay attention to this, let's get interested in this, let's track this moment by moment by moment by moment. And in order to do that, the mind that pays attention has to stop paying attention and stop doing whatever else it would be doing. Because the mind doesn't do 2 things at the same time. It does 1 thing at a time. And if we're tracking something ordinary, then it's necessarily dropping so much of its mental activity, most of which is agitating and disturbing the kind of balance and stability of samadhi, that unification, that gathered, stable, settled, pure, whole quality. And all those words is what we mean by that samadhi, that unification of mind. And I mentioned last week it gets badly translated as concentration. So let me read a little bit. I included this article in the document that I've been pasting for everybody in the chat. And for all of you in the room, remember you can get the Sunday resources. Just go to the calendar, online calendar for Common Ground. And when you look at the Sunday morning program, right there where it has the Zoom link and the details, there will be a link for the document. And I keep adding articles, and then when we change topic, I start fresh. But for a couple months now, I'll just keep accumulating some articles related to mindfulness of breathing, including this one from Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who's a Buddhist monk, an American Buddhist monk, abbot of a monastery outside of San Diego. And he practiced for many years in Thailand, and but has been now running the monastery there. And he's an amazing scholar and meditation teacher. And this is his article, The Steps of Breath Meditation. And just let me read a couple paragraphs. In the latter stages of breath meditation, the emphasis is focused less on the breath than on the mind as it relates to the breath. In the beginning stages, though, the emphasis is on the breath itself, on using the breath to snare the mind and bring it into the present moment. In the first two steps, you are simply with long breathing and short breathing, or you could say gross and refined breathing. In the first two steps, you're simply with long breathing and short breathing, sensitizing yourself to what long and short breathing feel like. Beginning with the third step, though, there's an element of volition. You train yourself. And the first thing you train yourself to do is be aware of the whole body as you breathe in, aware of the whole body as you breathe out. When the Buddha describes concentration states, he doesn't use images of single-pointedness. This is a really important point now. That's why I wanted to read this paragraph. He urges images of whole body awareness. When a sense of rapture and pleasure comes from the breath, he tells you to knead that sense of rapture and pleasure through the whole body. This knead is K-N-E-A-D, like you knead bread. The way you would knead water into flour to make dough. Right? So we've done the work of training the mind to be attentive to something ordinary, to be interested in breathing in and breathing out. And that's caused the mind to drop its ordinary activities, its neurotic ordinary activities. And then we bring in this element of inclusivity. We're including the whole body. And there's some pleasure there. And it's like we're integrating the pleasure and the rhythm of breathing in and out with the totality of the energy of the body. And this is that spreading of calm. And the hard thing here for us is we have, and this is just our animal instinct, where things that are painful get our attention. It's like an instinct. Something's hurting, something seems dangerous, we look at it. So here we are, still feeling our body, our mind, but the Buddha is saying, just keep in mind the pleasure of simplicity, the unity of the whole body, and the deepening, the spreading of calm. It's really we're healing the relationship between the knowing mind and the body that's being known. In the same way that some of us have healed the relationships in our family, with a friend, with a lover, the mind and the body don't always get along. Sometimes the mind really hates the body, like when it's painful or doesn't behave itself, can't do what we want it to do. And we can have a lot of shame around our body, all kinds of neurotic tendencies in that relationship. But now the mind is knowing the body, is in that kind of allowing, non-judging, inclusive way. And all of that feels good. And we want to knead that good feeling until it spreads, fills the totality of the experience of the body. Let me just read a couple more sentences here. Another image the Buddha uses of the rapture welling up from within the body and filling the body just like a spring of cool water coming up from the bottom of a lake, filling the entire lake with its coolness, that suffusion. Another image of lotuses standing in a lake. Some of the lotuses don't come above the water, but stay totally immersed in the water, saturated from their roots to their tips with the stillness and coolness of the water in the lake. Still, another image the Buddha uses is of a person wrapped in a white cloth, totally surrounded by the white cloth from head to foot, so all of the body is covered by the white cloth. Now here, I believe the way I interpret that last one, because as a simile, it's a little maybe stranger, it's like a very light cloth, just lightly touching the skin. Because in a more refined states of that inner happiness of seclusion, it's just like a really light feeling. But the most important point that we can take home and work with this week, and you have to work with it, is there is an inner pleasure, it's essential for navigating the spiritual life to feel how it feels good to turn inward. Otherwise, excuse me. Otherwise, what happens is the mind keeps going to sense experience for satisfaction. Endlessly frustrated, but not knowing what else to do, we imagine the next food we're going to eat, the next entertainment we're going to watch, the next conversation we're going to have, the next itch we're going to scratch, and that kind of gets us through life. The endless pursuit of interesting sense experiences and avoiding the unpleasant sense experiences. But there's no end to that. And then we hear these kinds of instructions and we check it out. We have to put some effort in before we start having some experience that, oh, there's really something to this. And then when we do get these meditative experiences, we start connecting the dots and we remember other moments in life, not when we were formally meditating, but when there was that pleasure of turning inward. And we might have associated it with some external thing, like, oh, I was in the woods, but it was really that the mind had dropped everything else. It's kind of why humans like intense experience. It's not the intensity, like people, do those strange things like jumping off of bridges with a bungee cord. Well, when you're jumping off that bridge, I'm imagining, I've never done that, but in that process, your mind drops everything else. It's not aware of anything else. I forget how it's said in French, but there's a phrase for making love that's translated like a little death. And it's the same thing with any kind of intense sense experience, a real strong pleasure. The mind initially is just all there because it's really pleasurable. The first moments of seeing a beautiful sunset or, some unusual phenomena like seeing a creature you haven't seen before. The mind is rapt and it drops everything else. It goes quiet, doesn't it? So we know that experience, we know that mental muscle of the mind dropping its dependence on the diversity, complexity of experience, and the mind, the mind is realizing is that it can be put down. It's not about putting it down forever, but when we know we can put it down, when we start paying attention to the ordinary details of life, we're holding it more lightly because we know we can put it down. That's the amazing thing. It's like it's a technique in bartering when you're trying to buy something or you're selling something, right? This is an age-old technique. You walk away from the deal. You show the person, I'm not afraid of losing this deal, and you have to really be willing to walk away so that the other person is convinced, oh, if I don't compromise, I'm going to lose the sale. And this is an inner principle. We have to be willing to die. We have to be willing to turn our attention away. So this third and fourth step in the Buddha's 16 instructions with the breath, and the 16 steps are there in the document that's in this, that will be on the calendar. You can do it, or if those of you online can just find it in the chat now. But the third and fourth step, what we're doing is, the Buddha is saying, don't pay attention to anything except I'm asking you to train yourself to pay attention to the good feeling in the totality of the body, right? Because you need the mind that is willing to allow the body to be the way it is. When this third step, when we're being aware of the whole body, we're not obsessing about the places in the body that are painful. It's a generous yes to the whole body. And when we can do that, then we'll start to notice the calming effect of that generous yes to the whole body. And we're then allowing that good feeling, that calm, to widen, to soften and widen, and start to fill the whole body. And remember the images, the similes the Buddha used, like spreading, one way it gets translated like a barber would whip up the lather and spread it. I forget the soap they used at the time, but you're kind of building the foam of the soap so it can spread. Or like the spring water permeates the entire lake. Or the lotuses that don't come above the water are completely submerged, suffused by the coolness, the wetness of the water. Nothing is untouched by that pleasurable quality. So part of the reason to talk about this is we want to feel an incentive because this feels good. We have to fall in love with our meditation practice, or it will run the course of all of our other habits we try to cultivate. We got to eat spinach, or we make kale smoothies, or whatever it is we thought was going to really fix our life, and bought the exercise equipment that now is sitting in the basement collecting dust, or whatever it might be. But the things we really stick with are things that we're deriving some resonant satisfaction from. But there's a hump we have to get over. We have to hear the instructions. We have to be inspired enough with the instructions that we're willing to undertake the training before we begin to feel the results. Because the results come because of that commitment to the training. And the training initially is knowing what it means to be present, and then bringing that present moment awareness to something neutral until there's some real continuity, which means the mind has dropped everything else in order to be continuously aware of the object, the meditation object, and then let the awareness start to be more inclusive of the present moment, like the totality of the body. And then with instructions 5 through 16, it's all about learning about the mind and heart. But the first 4 are really the integration of body and mind. And really getting a sense of this real pleasure. It's not hypothetical, it's not theoretical, it's real. And it feels good. And it's healing. So remember, you can always send me in your questions, because on Sunday morning I don't usually take questions, but really great to respond to your questions, so you can just email them to the center, or if you have my emails, directly to me, and I'll cover them. And then Sunday evenings I do have Q&A time, but that's not recorded, so it's just for the people in town. But people out of town, if you have questions, please raise them, or raise them in your small groups. So now we're going to break into small groups. Of course, no one has to stay. I'll just stay for a moment if you would. But Nancy's here online, and Eric will be dividing people in this room here. Yeah, and why don't you come up here, Leah? Yeah, but before we end, I wanted to pass the mic to Leah Dunbar, one of our longtime teachers of our youth programs, and just a general wonderful person here in our community.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to take a second to invite everyone to our community potluck on September 11th. Feels good to occupy this space and gather and know that this community right here can be a real source of healing in our lives. So if you can come, bring a vegetarian dish to share, or just come if that doesn't feel like doable that day. There's many opportunities. It'll be right after this Sunday program with Mark. there's going to be childcare available that day. If you have little ones, maybe come a little bit early, get them acquainted with the room. And also volunteer opportunities. There's a couple if you feel like you could do that. Maybe Nancy or Shannon could drop the link. It should be on the Common Ground website. There's a Google Doc to sign up. So childcare, perhaps volunteer to bring, to give someone a ride if they need it. Also, if you need a ride, please let Robin know in the office. We really want to invite everyone back, and if you want to come here, we want to make sure you have a ride. Let's see, clean up or set up, clean up, and during the potluck. So if you feel like you could volunteer, please check that link out. Otherwise, just come. We'll be in this space, we'll be in the garden. If it rains, we'll just occupy the whole downstairs, wherever we need to fit. So, thank you.
And I think Robin's gathering online volunteers. For those of you who live out of town, there will be an online lunch. You won't be able to share your dishes, but you can describe your food in great detail for each other. So